friends, welcome back to another edition of Kicking It with the Texas Chancla. I'm the Texas Chancla, aka Attorney Jesse Hernandez, and today we are kicking it with me. Yeah, so today we're going to try something different, and we're going to get to know a little bit about me. One of the things that I love to do when I have a guest on is I ask them to introduce themselves to our viewers at home for the people who may not know who they are. So for those of you who've been following us, or maybe this is your first time, welcome. But I'm going to tell you who I am. And, I'm going to share a little bit about me today. And hopefully it brings us a little closer together. Or, if it doesn't, sorry. But okay, so who am I? I am the Texas Chancla. But really, I am Jesse Hernandez. I am a father. I am an attorney. I am a CEO of a law firm. I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a lot of different things. But I think the thing that defines me the most these days is being a father. I have a 10-year-old son. He lives with me most of the time. We split time with his mom, but he stays with me, and often my dad is there to kind of have grandpa in the house with my son. And as a dad, that kind of controls a lot of things that I never thought it would. Being a dad kind of means I have to be more mature than I used to be. If you'd have met me 5 years ago, I was a completely different guy. I was out of control in some aspects. I really didn't know what to do with my free time because, as an attorney, I work a lot. And I'm an attorney who has my own law firm, the law office of Jesse Hernandez, right? Right now, we are a firm of 20 people. We have about 6 attorneys, 14 team members other than that. And that takes up a lot of my time. And I've been growing this firm since my son was born. My son's 10. The firm started 10 years ago. And so 5 years ago, before my son came to live with me, I really didn't know what to do with myself. I would go to work, I'd go to court, I'd go back to the office, I'd manage this little law firm, and I was trying to make it grow. And that was really all I had time for. I didn't really have any hobbies. I didn't really have a lot of close friends that I spent time with. So really, there wasn't a lot of things for me to do. And what I would do is basically from work, I would go hang out at the bar. And looking back at it, I realized that wasn't really a healthy thing to do, but it's what I was doing then. And it really became problematic for me. It's problematic for me in one sense that's affecting me now. And that's that as a result of being irresponsible, I picked up a DWI. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, Jesse, in addition to the Texas Chancla, weren't you one time DWI Jesse? Like, didn't you make an entire law firm and a brand about being a DWI attorney? How do you get a DWI? Well, I didn't follow my own advice. And that's that if you drink, you shouldn't drive, right? That's rule number one. That's being a responsible adult. And I wasn't doing that. Like I said, I was a little out of control. I asked a friend of mine and he told me, hey, Jesse, you know that when you come in here, you were typically doing 15 to 25 shots a night. And if that doesn't sound crazy enough, at that point in my life, I was going to this bar literally every night that I didn't have my son. And I would go from 5 p.m. basically until 2 a.m. every night of the week that I didn't have my son. And so I was kind of spinning out of control. And this one night, I hit all the usual bars that I go to or that I went to. And I decided that, hey, it's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and drive home. And so as I was driving home, I was distracted and I didn't see a car in front of me stop at the Wurzbach data point light. And I hit the brakes too late. I crashed into them. Luckily, there were no serious injuries, but the police were called. And of course, the DWI unit shows up and I'm arrested for DWI. That's bad, right? That's really bad. I'm an attorney. At that time, I had already been on Good Morning America. I had already gained a little bit of notoriety from my marketing and things like that. So it was kind of a big deal. But what made it even worse was this. I spent the night in jail. I moved, as some of you who've been to jail know, that first night you're getting moved from cell to cell as they're kind of moving people in and out, waiting for bonds and things like that. And so I got moved around. I spent about 12 hours in jail, met a lot of new people, but when I get out, there are news cameras there. And I was not expecting that. And I did the absolute worst thing that you can do if there are news cameras waiting for you. I ran from the news cameras. So instead of just sitting there and answering the questions from the reporter, how do you explain this to your clients? Which would have been easy, right? I'm a defense attorney. I understand that people are sometimes wrongly accused and arrested for crimes. So I think my clients would understand perfectly well, why I might be arrested, and they would understand having been in the situations. Instead of giving that kind of an answer, I decide I don't want to be on TV, so let me run from the camera, which, in case you didn't know, makes for great TV unless you're the one running for the camera. So that got shared on everything. Literally every news channel in San Antonio had my face, had the information about my arrest. It got picked up all around the country, and it wasn't global news, but different news stations, different newspapers, different news sources picked it up and ran it. So for the longest time, if you Googled DWI Jesse or Jesse Hernandez or the law office of Jesse Hernandez, you would get this video of me and my chunky butt running from a camera. I do think, though, that my speed was quite impressive for a man of my size, but that's not the point. But it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And what tends to happen in these situations is you get home, and as people start to find out, one of two things happens. People share it, right? They're going to share the articles. They're going to be like, I knew this guy was a POS. I knew he was a jerk, whatever. Or people are going to start texting you and calling you, depending on whether they're truly a friend or, they're one of those fake friends that have just been waiting for you to fall down. And I had both. And surprisingly, some of the ones that shared the articles, some of the ones that said some of the nastiest comments, surprised me. But it's a good way to know who your real friends are and who your fake friends are. I don't recommend it. It's 0 out of 10. Do not recommend to find out who your good friends are and who your bad friends are. But it was a way of finding out. And I'll tell you what, your good friends are the ones that reach out to you and, hey, I know you're not okay, but if you need anything, give me a call. Thinking about you. I'm sorry this is happening to you. I got a lot of those. But the best call I got was from an ex-girlfriend. I hadn't talked to her in a while. Again, ex-girlfriend, right? I hadn't talked to her a while, but she did the one thing that not even my mom did. My mom told me, hey, it happens, you'll deal with it, whatever. I thought she was going to get super mad. She didn't. She was just like, hey, you know how this goes. We support you, whatever. But I got one phone call from an ex, and this is what she said. How could you be so stupid? How could you be so selfish? I don't care about you. I don't care about your career, but you have a son. How could you put yourself in a position where you could compromise everything that you have built for him, right? Because this firm that I built, I told you that it started 10 years ago, and I told you that my son was 10 years old. What I didn't tell you is that the reason I started this firm is that the law firm I was working at the time my son was born was horrible to me. They didn't want to pay me the money that they owed me as referral fees. They didn't even want to pay me the salary that they had promised me. In the year that I was there, I had made them over $300,000, $400,000 in referrals. They didn't care about that. And what I realized is I didn't want to work for a law firm that didn't value me, that didn't recognize the contributions I was making to their success. So realizing that I had just become a father, I said, forget this, I'm leaving. I walked out, $50 in my bank account, no cases, no marketing, no office, but I decided I was going to start my own law firm. I did that because I had just had a son. And so flashing back to this ex-girlfriend yelling at me, she's telling me, you've told me you built this law firm, that you walked out of that other job for your son so that you could have a life where if he has choir, if he has a play, if he has a game, you could just go and you don't have to worry about a boss telling you, no, Jesse, you can't have time off. You told me, Jesse, that you're building this law firm for your son so that one day if he wants it, he can have it, but that so you can give him everything financially that you didn't have. You built this for him, and then you go out and do something this selfish, this stupid. She let me have it for about 45 minutes, just yelling at me like she didn't even yell at me when we were together. You know, that was the most impactful conversation I have probably ever had with anybody. Because from that moment going forward, I realized that this was my fault, that I did this to myself, that there's no one else to blame, and that I had an obligation to things much bigger than myself. I had an obligation to my son. So from that day forward, for 2.5 years, I didn't have a single drink. Cold turkey. Just said, nope. I went from having 5 to 7 days of drinking every week with 15 to 25 shots a night. I went from that to not having any alcohol at all. Because she told me the truth. This wasn't about me. My life wasn't my own life. I wasn't just Jesse Hernandez. I wasn't DWI Jesse. I was Jeremy's dad. I was a father. And since that moment, it's become stronger and stronger with me to realize that that's what I am first. Of all the things that I want to do, of all the Jessies that I can potentially be, the first thing that I always have to be is Jeremy's father. And so that's why when people ask me, who are you? What are you? The first thing, the primary thing, the most important thing is I'm a dad. And that means something. That means I have to act differently than I may want to. That means I have to do things differently than I may want to. And one of those things was getting a grasp on my life with respect to the things that can make me spin out of control. One of those was alcohol. When you're doing it, when you're out there partying, when you're out there popping bottles, when you're out there having this great time, you often don't realize that you may be more out of control than you thought. And so I did all of the things that I would tell a DWI client to do. I signed up for intensive outpatient treatment. Did I think I was an alcoholic? Not really, right? Because just like everyone else, I was like, if I wanted to stop drinking, I could stop drinking. Alcohol doesn't have an effect on my life. Alcohol's not doing anything to me, except it really was. If I look back on it and I think, how many times did I cut out of work early because I wasn't feeling well? How many times did I roll into the office later than I should have because I felt a little hungover? How many times did, I change plans because I wanted to go to this bar instead of that bar? Alcohol had a big effect on me, and it was really controlling who I was and what I was doing. And I didn't even realize that. But the biggest part is, how many times was I driving home when I shouldn't have been? But this conversation, this situation did. And for 2 years, I didn't have a single thing to drink. And I took the advice that I would give any of my DWI clients. Go seek treatment. Intensive outpatient treatment. I did it here. And it was tough. It was really tough. But I learned a lot of things about alcohol. I learned a lot of things about myself and my relationship with alcohol, things that would trigger me to drink. Because this is something that a lot of people don't know. Drinking to make yourself feel happy, drinking because you feel sad, drinking because you feel lonely, those are signs of alcoholism. That's not just like, hey, normal. That's alcohol controlling you and your life. So those may be signs of alcoholism. I learned a lot. I started going to AA. And one of the things I will say is this. In AA, you don't put other people's business out there that are going to AA. There are two people who stepped up in this time and reached out to me. One of them was a fellow attorney. And that attorney called me, said, hey, I'd like to have lunch with you. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. I'd like to collaborate with this attorney on, some stuff. And I go to meet this attorney, and the attorney tells me their testimony, basically, about their life and their relationship with alcohol and the effects that it had had on them. And I was sitting there like, I didn't think I was coming to be sandbagged. I didn't think I was coming to be tricked here about this topic. But the attorney really opened up, shared all of their secrets, things that other people didn't know, they were sharing with me. And then after meeting for a couple of hours, that attorney did something that changed my life. That attorney said, would you like to go to a meeting with me right now? There's one at this church up the street from where we were at. Come with me. Just see what it's like. And so I went. And, this was a book-based meeting. And that's kind of like, when it's AA, there's a few different types that you can go to. Some are book-based, and that's kind of like going to a Bible-based church where, they're going to open it up and they're going to read from the book, and, they're going to go down, and that's basically a lot of what's discussed there. And then there's some that are like Catholic churches, almost, where you don't really even ever look at the Bible. But this was a book-based one, and I didn't have a book. And so this attorney takes the book that they had, hands it to me and says, take mine, keep it. This has been good for me. This has guided me through my journey. I want it to guide you through yours. And again, at this point, I don't know if I have a problem with alcohol or not, but I have this attorney that I really respected, who has opened up to me and opened my eyes, taken me to a meeting, given me that book. And I take that book and I read the book. I read the entire book, and I will share with you that between that time and now, I have probably read that entire book 40 to 50 times. And if you do read that book, I think it can be eye-opening. Some of it may seem not so relevant in modern times. Some of it may not seem to apply to you. But if you're in the right space where that book is going to be helpful to you, the Blue Book will definitely help you. But so I had the attorney do that. And then I had a friend that I've known since basically middle school, who had their own struggles with alcohol and stronger substances. They reached out to me. I met with them and I went to meetings with them. And that's something that I have adopted, even now, where I can tell you that I do not have a problem with alcohol. I can tell you right now that I haven't even had a sip of alcohol since April 24th or 25th of 2022. And it's March 8th of 2023. And that's not because any particular reason other than I'm kind of over alcohol. I've been drinking alcohol since I was like 15 and in high school. I hope my dad doesn't see this, but I'm kind of over it. There's nothing you can do with alcohol that I haven't done in some form or capacity, and that's good or bad. On either side of it, I've done it all. So at this point, I'm 44 years old. If I drink on Friday, I'm going to be feeling that Monday. And that's not even like drinking a lot. That's like if I drink 2 beers on Friday, I'm still going to be hurting on Monday. So it's just become something that's fallen out of my life. But over the last few years since I picked up the DWI, I've had that investigation. I've had that conversation with myself repeatedly about, is alcohol a problem or is it just problematic where we're at right now? I never would have done that if it wouldn't have been for these two individuals and if it wouldn't have been for that ex that called me. Now, why am I telling you this? Because it helps to define who I am and how I do things now. I am a criminal defense attorney. And one of the first things I do, and that I have taught the attorneys in my firm to do when we have someone come to us with an alcohol-related offense, is seek treatment immediately. And I tell folks when I talk to them, look, I don't know you. I don't know your drinking habits. I don't know if you have a problem or not. But I know that you should investigate that if you've done something with alcohol that's brought you here where you need me. If you need a criminal defense attorney because of something that's happened with alcohol, then that's a perfect time to investigate that relationship. That's one part of it. The other part of it is a strategic point. If you go to a judge and you have a DWI first, and you can honestly look that judge in the eye, and your attorney can tell that judge, Your Honor, my client was arrested for DWI in March. Immediately, he or she went and began to go to AA meetings. He or she went and did the DWI education class. He or she went and did the DWI victim impact panel. He or she went and sought outpatient treatment or some sort of counseling. That makes you look very good to that judge, because every other person in that courtroom that's charged with the DWI likely has not done that. But what the judge knows about you is that you take this charge seriously and that you take the situation behind the charge seriously. A judge, a prosecutor may then look at you and say, you know what? You don't deserve the harshest treatment. You don't deserve the worst sentence, because you get it. You understand that what you did was dangerous, that it was risky, and you understand the behavior that led to you being here. And because you've addressed those, we don't have to give you court-ordered things to make you face those and to make you deal with those. So the fact that I've been through this situation makes me a better defense attorney. It makes me a better person in a lot of ways than I used to be, because now I have to understand these things about myself. And anytime we have a little bit of an awakening, I mean, I don't want to say I'm woke, but anytime we have a little bit of awakening, it makes us better as we evaluate and improve on ourselves. I'll tell you another way that this has affected me. It was sitting in that cell, right? At this point, I was already a DWI attorney for, I don't know, close to 10 years. I had handled every type of DWI from, every type of alcohol-related offense, from a public intoxication to intoxication manslaughter. I'd handled them all. I could tell you front and back every range of punishment for a DWI, every side consequence, every collateral damage for a DWI. I could tell you all of those things. But still, as I was sitting there that night, right, in that cell, after being arrested, after having my picture taken, after having my blood drawn, I'm sitting in that cell with all these other guys. And you know what I'm doing? I'm sitting there scared to death, because I'm thinking, is my son's mom going to use this against me? Is she going to decide that she wants my son to not see his dad anymore because he was irresponsible and he did these things? I'm thinking, this law firm that I've been building for 5 years at that time, this law firm that I've been building, this reputation that I've been building, is that gone? Did I just destroy my entire legal career? And I know the answers, right? I know the answers to all of these things because I've handled all of these things. But even me, with all of that experience, with all of those years as a DWI attorney, I was sitting in that cell scared to death about all of them. What's going to happen? Am I going to have the ignition interlock in my car? Am I going to have to report to some mean probation officer who's, going to make my life miserable? All of these questions. And at the time, it didn't strike me, but the next days when I was back in my own home, it struck me that while that was a horrible situation that I put myself in, and while I was 100% responsible, I want no one to misunderstand that. I know that I was 100% the sole person responsible for the situation that I put myself in. I blame no one else. I don't blame any bartenders. I don't blame any bars. I don't blame a cop. I don't blame any of that. I am responsible for my actions. I broke the law, and it was my fault, and I should have known better. But when I got back to my house, I was sitting there and I was thinking, if I was scared about these things, then how must your normal person who knows nothing about Texas criminal defense, knows nothing about the laws in the state, knows nothing about DWI, how must they feel that night And not just that night that they're in jail, but the next days when they're out. What must their level of fear be like, having this DWI over their head when they have gone their entire 20, 30, 40, or 50 years never being in trouble with the law? It makes so much sense to me now why people come to me and they're looking at me and they're thinking, Jesse, and they ask me, Jesse, I got a DWI. Am I going to prison? And, for me as a defense lawyer, I'm like, you're not going to prison. Like, prison isn't even on the table for a DWI first. Worst case, jail, but that's not Texas Department of Corrections. But it made sense to me why people are so scared. They have no idea what could happen. They have no idea how this could affect them. And that made me look at my law firm and the way that we treat clients, the way we handle them. So we've had training since then about, what? I get the fact that as paralegals, as attorneys, you handle 1,000 of these a year. And so when someone calls you 10 times in 1 week about things that seem so rudimentary, so basic, I see why sometimes paralegals and attorneys get frustrated because they're like, doesn't everybody know this? But having been through that situation, I can now go back to my staff and I can tell them, trust me, they don't know the answers to these questions. Even an attorney who's been doing this for 10 years didn't know the answers to these things that night and had these fears. So we need to be more compassionate in the way that we address these. See, having been through the system helps me understand people who are going through it a little better. And so I'm not going to lie and say, this has been a blessing in disguise, because it hasn't. It has been very, very unpleasant. And again, I have myself to blame for that. But we have taken lemons from this situation, and we have made a law firm that is more compassionate, that is more empathetic, and that treats people in a way that I wished I would have been able to be treated at that time. But enough about the DWI, because, enough about that. Let's talk about other things. So why did I ever decide that, hey, I should be a criminal defense lawyer? And she would cringe if she was still here to hear me say this, but I blame my mom. I really do. I grew up with a military dad. My dad was in the Army as long as I've been here, even before it, because I was born in Fort Hood. And my dad was in the Army, and my mom alternated between being a stay-at-home mom. She was a teacher's aide. She did a lot of different things. She worked when Levi Strauss was here in San Antonio, she worked there for a while. But most of my life, she alternated between either being a stay-at-home mom or being a teacher's aide. And most of the time, she worked with either physically disabled or emotionally disabled children. And I'm not sure what the correct term is, so I apologize if that's offensive. But she worked with children who needed extra help as a teacher's aide. And she very much loved that. But because my dad was in the military, this was a time before technology. I mean, not like the Stone Age, but before cell phones and things like that. So my dad would often be stationed overseas. He was in Korea for a few years. He was often in the field. And so there were many times where, even though my mom was married, it was like being raised by a single mom. And my mom was basically there day in, day out, all day, every day. And so she had a big part of shaping who I was and who I would eventually become. One of the biggest things that my mom taught us was that you protect people who are weaker than you. It doesn't matter if that's your sibling. It doesn't matter if your friend. It doesn't matter if it's a stranger that's at your school. It is your job as someone who is strong to protect people that are not as strong as you. It is your job to stand up not just for others, but to stand up for yourself. My mom had this rule, and I know some of you are going to cringe when I say this, but some of you are going to have the feeling that we had the same mom. And that's this. My mom would say, if someone's going to fight you at school, you do not run away. If you come home because you ran away from a fight, then I'm going to take you back to school and you're going to fight that person because you're going to settle this. And she had another rule that you could either fight that kid at school or you could come home and you could fight her. So it was clear we would rather fight the kid at school. For my brothers growing up, you don't leave your brother behind. If someone's picking on your brother, you go stand with your brother against that person. But it was these rules, and it was these rules especially about protecting people who were weaker than you. Sometimes you come home and you share a story about someone who was being picked on or somebody who was being abused by a classmate or a teacher or someone, and you think that mom would share in your sympathy and be like, oh, wow, that's so sad. She wouldn't. She'd be upset and she'd say, why didn't you do something to stop that? Well, because it doesn't matter. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you bring attention to it? Why didn't you find someone who could make it stop? That was it. That was it from day one, right? Is you were going to protect other people. And if you said, Mom, I'm not strong enough to protect other people, yes, you are. And if you're not, then pardon, but this is what Mama H would say. You can get your ass beat with them, but they're not going to get beat alone. That was it. It's no excuse that it was 5 people picking on this one other person. If you saw it, it was your obligation to step up and stop it. That would later torture my mom because she really, really wanted me to be an engineer. She did her best when I was in middle school and high school, sending me to Texas A&M Kingsville for their prep program. I don't think she understood that engineers needed to be good at both math and science. I was good at neither one of those. I was her son, and what she was good at was talking. And that's what I'm good at, is talking. I don't think she understood that talking does not make you a good engineer. Math and science does. So that was never going to happen. But she was so heartbroken when I went to UT and I told her, hey, I'm going to study government. I'm going to study communication studies. She's like, why not engineering? And I'm like, again, Mom, do you not remember my report cards? Very, very bad grades in those subjects. So I told her I was going to law school and she was like, cool. You could be a prosecutor. You could work for a company. I was like, no, I want to be a defense attorney. And she kind of knew this because if you were to ask her before she passed, when I started showing signs that I wanted to be an attorney, she would tell you it was about the time I was 4 or 5. I would mimic Perry Mason or whoever was on TV. I would tell people that I either wanted to be a Marine or I wanted to be a prosecutor. But she knew for a long time. She just hoped against it. And I have a lot of stories about my mom as a criminal defense attorney, my interactions with her. But I think this one sums it up the best. She was very proud of me for going to law school. She was very proud of me for chasing my dreams. She did not like the fact that I was a criminal defense attorney. And this is the kind of conversation I would have with her when I'd visit her out in Lytle on a Sunday before a trial. She'd ask me, hey, what's going on this week? I say, Mom, I have a trial. I tell her about the client. I tell her about the charge. And she'd say, okay. And you're going to put him in jail. She'd always ask, you're going to put him in jail? I'm like, Mom, I'm a defense attorney trying to keep him out of jail. You're like, okay. So that'd be it. And then as I'm getting ready to go, she would always say the same thing. She'd say, I hope you do really well in your trial, but I hope your client goes to prison. Every single time. Every single time. She did not like the fact that I was a criminal defense attorney, but she did like the fact that I was happy. But I say I blame this on her because, like I told you, she raised us to be fighters and not just to start arbitrary fights, but to fight for others. So if you raise a child in the Catholic faith and you raise him to be a fighter for people who are less fortunate, how are you surprised that he wants to defend people who are being accused by the state of Texas, right? Most of us are from Texas, and we know that Texas is the greatest state in the entire country. So I chose a career path where on a daily basis, the heading of the cases that I deal with are the greatest state in America, Texas, versus Jesse's client. My clients are facing either the United States of America or the state of Texas, and everything that means. That means prosecutors from the best schools, prosecutors with almost unlimited budgets, investigators, the FBI, the Sheriff's Department, the Texas Rangers, DPS, police departments. All of those people are trying to put my clients in jail. And who does my client have? They have me. Every time I step into a courtroom, I am David fighting the state of Texas, aka Goliath. That is the career path I chose, and my mom never understood why. It's because if I don't stand up for this guy, I got to go home and fight her. So I will fight the state of Texas 1,000 times over before I go home and face that woman and tell her I was too scared to stand up for someone. And why am I attracted to the worst types of cases? I handle lots of sexual assault cases. I handle lots of murder cases. I handle lots of aggravated robberies, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Why do I love those? Why do I love going into a courtroom representing clients on those? Because I want to fight the biggest cases. I want to fight the biggest bullies out there. I want to take the guy who's got the smallest chance to win, and I want to make him win. Because since I was this high, I mean, literally I'm this high now, but when I was that high, it was always the same thing with Mama H. You fight for the guy who needs your help. You are strong, you fight for the weak. And that's everything I do. That's the entire reason I've chosen criminal defense. And that's also why my second favorite thing to do is personal injury. The little grandma who gets hit by an 18-wheeler, what chance does she stand against that 18-wheeler's insurance company? None. They have the money. They have the power. Who does she have? I mean, now she has the Chancla, so I think that levels it out, right? When the state of Texas, when the United States government come for you, get the Chancla, right? That's my job. That's what I have been made for, is to fight for people who need someone to fight for them. That's why I chose criminal defense. That's why I do this. If you were to ask me, is criminal defense what you do or who you are? I would tell you 1,000%. It's who I am. You could take me out of criminal defense, but I'm still going to think like a criminal defense lawyer. I'm still going to want the little guy to win. I'm still going to want the big guy to fall on his face. And I'm still going to want to mix it up. I'm going to want to fight. I mean, not with actual fists because I'm kind of weak and I don't have good cardio, but like with words, dude, I'll fight all day. I've got you on that. So that's how we got to be criminal defense, right? Because it's the only thing where you get to fight for the little guy. So how did we go from Jesse Hernandez to the Texas Chancla? But we'll get into the rest of that next week. Friends, thank you for tuning in to Kicking It with the Texas Chancla. I'm the Texas Chancla, attorney Jesse Hernandez. If you like what you heard or saw, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, share it, and leave us a review. If there's anything you want to tell us, leave it in the comments down below so that we can get better at this. And thank you so much for tuning in.